Hello, everybody, and welcome to the end of the Mutant Waves. We have reached the final hero for all three of the X-Men waves, Kitty Pryde, a character that I will freely admit I was a little afraid to cover only because I just found her as a hero as somebody hard for me to kind of grapple with. We're here, we're ready, we're going to make the best of it, and I think I've got myself in the right mindset. So we're going to talk about the hero pack, we're going to talk about the obligation and the Nemesis. We're going to look at an example deck so that if you are new to Marvel Champions, you are an X-Men fan, you picked up the Mutant Genesis box that she came out of, you are ready to hit the ground running, hopefully get the best out of the character that you can. So we're going to start right off with Kitty Pryde, the alter ego with 3 recovery, the mutant trait, and the setup, put mass form upgrade into play, solid side face up, and she has a phase control ability, which is an action where you can flip your mass form upgrade once per round. And it's really important to understand just how this mass form upgrade works. She also has 6 hand size and 9 hit points. She's very squishy. But in terms of the mass form upgrade, let's talk about that real quick because that is a 2-sided card. And on this side, obviously, we have the solid form, which is a hero resource. You can exhaust it to generate a physical resource for an attack or defense event, which is also thematic of the card. As we go through her cards, you'll understand why that is thematic. And then a response, after you attack or defend in solid mass form, flip this card. And I think one of the things that I have overlooked a lot is that this is a response. It's not a forced response. You don't have to change to phased form if you don't want to. It is just an option that you have. So this is just a resource generator that you have right off the bat if you need it to be. Although I will say that once we flip this over, once we go to the other form, that is a pretty powerful form. And that would be the phased form. And this is an upgrade that is also permanent, is also mass form, and phased is while Shadowcat is defending, she does not take damage. And a forced response of, after you attack or defend in phased mass form, flip this card over. This is forced. So if you defend, if you attack, you're going to go from this form into the solid form. This being the super defensive form, I think it's probably right that you automatically have to kind of get booted out of it if you happen to make any kind of defense or attack. I think what's key here is that while she's defending, so we will be looking at cards that just have the defense trait on them, that have the word defense after the hero action. That counts. So once you've done that, you're not going to take any damage. Once the circumstances of that defense or that attack is over, you're going to flip back over. This is going to become solid. It all makes sense for the character. It's just the balance of that, I think, was the thing that hung me up the most and made it so that this is a hard hero package to kind of grapple with. But let's also talk about Shadowcat real quick. So Shadowcat is a hero X-Men. She's got 2/2/2 stats and the selective intangibility text. While you are in phased form, Shadowcat ignores the guard and patrol keywords and any crisis icons in play. So this is massive. We looked at the ally version of Shadowcat last week with Colossus. And basically, it's almost as if that's always in phased form. Shadowcat has the ability to just sort of not even worry about guard or patrol. She's I would say that while aggression is what she came in, and protection I think is where you can logically go very quickly with a small card pool. I think as time goes on, I think she works really well in aggression because she also is pretty good for thwarting. She is able to get around these keywords, thus making her, I guess if you're in aggression, you're kind of okay with dealing with minions. But regardless, I think that it gives you a bump in a place that aggression kind of is weakened, or she can go turbo justice. And she can just be the hero that just ignores everything that's supposed to stand in the way of justice. And I think that's really cool. Once again, it's the mass form that I think is the thing that hung me up the most, made it so that it was hard for me to kind of understand the tempo. And I will freely admit that part of that is because I thought the solid response was a forced response, so that you were just constantly flipping this mass form over it, and it made it so much of a headache. But let's get on to the rest of the cards. But real quick, let's also do our community spotlight. And normally my community spotlight would be talking about something recent in the Marvel Champions community just to highlight, but this time I want to highlight the episode of Critical Encounters where they talk about the White Queen. I was on that episode. It was like a year ago, and I think it's a really great episode, and I think that it will just be a nice companion piece to this episode. So go check that out. Link will be in the description, and that would be it. Let's talk real quick about Lockheed. He is a 2-cost ally, 1 thwart, 1 attack, 2 health. He is a dragon and an X-Men. And he has the response, after Lockheed enters play, if you are in solid mass form, deal 2 damage to an enemy. If you are in phased form, remove 2 threat from a scheme. So this is where I feel like Shadowcat, this is the first sign of Shadowcat being a character that very much rewards somebody who thinks ahead. And while in other games, and even in Marvel Champions to some extent, I do enjoy that, I just failed to like really have that coalesce for me with Shadowcat. But I think the fact that Lockheed just comes into play, he's a very cheap ally. He's not going to do a whole lot, but when he comes into play and he can deal 2 damage or he can remove 2 threat, he's going to do what you're looking to do in that moment. Hopefully reaching the state that you want to be in is not too much of a tax, but also if you have him in your hand, you kind of know that this is what I would like to do this turn, and just that extra reach of basically either dealing 2 damage and thwarting for 1, or dealing 3 damage, or thwarting for 3, or thwarting for 1, or dealing 1 damage and thwarting for 2. Like he has a bunch of combination states here that mean that Lockheed can come down and really kind of help you to do either a lot in 1 stat or a good amount spread out between the 2 actions that he can do. Then we've got 3 copies of Shadowcat Surprise, a 2-cost event, hero action superpower, hero action, attack, deal 3 damage to an enemy, ready your hero. So I'm kind of 2 minds. I think that this might be, of her attack events, I think this might be the stronger of them, because while you're not dealing as much damage as you might want to for Pain 2, you are readying up, which gives you a lot of flexibility with how you're going to use your turn. I do also feel like, seen as this additionally, not only does it ready you up, but it also changes your mass form. It can very well change your mass, so it can help to put you in the form you want to be in. Conveniently, the mass form doesn't care about thwarting, so if you do want to deal 3 damage, ready yourself back up, put yourself into phase form, and just thwart, you can do that. But I also don't know how highly I rate this card, and I feel like the only thing that I rated against is I think it is like I said, I think it's better than her other attack event, which we'll get to, but I don't know if it moves the needle a lot. But I'm also just not a big Shadowcat player. After doing this and after thinking it over, I may try her more and more, but as of right now, I'm kind of at a weird point here where I don't know where I sit with this card, because you're spending 3 resources to ready. But readying Mac opens you up to a lot of possibilities with Shadowcat. And you are dealing 3 damage. And so this card kind of represents like a medium, at least in terms to me, kind of represents a medium amount of a lot of things you want to do. And I think all those things together make them better than their, separate parts. But I don't know if this is a card that when I play Shadowcat, I'm going to always prioritize. It's kind of what I'm getting at. I'm very long-winded just to say that I feel like this is a lot of medium effects at a medium price that may be a large thing once you put them all together. Very long-winded. Then we've got Acute Control, a 1-cost upgrade superpower. Hero response: after you ignore the guard or patrol keyword on a minion, exhaust Acute Control, deal 2 damage to that minion. I think that just in general, this is really great because you're already dealing with a side scheme or the main scheme in a way that the game is not intending, and you're helping to get that minion out of the way. This also does help because you are only ignoring this stuff in your phased form. So if at some point you need to go to solid form, maybe because the game forces you to, you would really like for that minion to be gone, and this is helping to chop away at that minion so that they are not going to continue to be a problem once you are in solid mass form. And I think this is, additionally, I think this is a card that I very much want to have out as soon as possible, because I think it does a lot of good work for you. Then we've got Intangible Interference, a 1-cost upgrade superpower. Hero response: after you ignore the crisis icon on a scheme, exhaust Intangible Interference, remove 2 threat from that scheme. This is great in solo play. This is great in multiplayer play. Because in this case, this does affect everybody. Like, it's going to allow you to help out a team. It's going to allow you to be better in solo in ways that other heroes just can't do. Once again, you are going to have to be in phased form. I don't think that's a big problem, because I think you want to be in phased form as much as possible. My past recollection says that you want to be in that form as much as possible, and this is going to help. Obviously, you're going to get pushed into... No, you won't. You won't get pushed into mass form, because mass form doesn't care about thwarting. Either way, I would say my favorite cards are these 2 cards. Very much like Cable, where I picked 2 of my favorite cards. This is a 2-card favorite card combo. I want both of these. I want either one of these in play as soon as possible, because they're going to be doing so much work, and they are something that I personally would say you want a hard mulligan for. Then we've got 2 copies of Phased Strike, a 3-cost event attack superpower. Deal 6 damage to an enemy. If you are in phased mass form, you may discard an attachment with the text hero action or hero response from that enemy. This is the other attack that I was talking about that I alluded to with Shadowcat Surprise. I feel like this is weaker. While I do think that there are a lot of times, I mean, this is why Sunfire is popular. There are a lot of times, and I suppose Magneto we can get a lot of use out of this with Magneto as well, but there's a lot of hero action, hero response text on attachments. But I do have to wonder if we overblow that, and that this is just going to be an overcosted 6 damage a lot of the time. I do think that Shadowcat does a good job of sort of like being a silent assassin, taking out these things like blanking parts of the game that normally are there to really kind of like trip you up. And so I do think she does serve a very good purpose. I just feel like this card may not be 6 damage plus an additional effect as much as readying up for 2 while dealing 3 damage. I think Shadowcat Surprise is a stronger card. I feel like this is... The ceiling's high, but I feel like it's sitting on a pretty low floor. Then we've got 2 copies of Quick Shift, a 0-cost event defense superpower. That's important. The defense part of this is very important. Hero interrupt defense. When an enemy attacks, if you are in solid form, change to phased form, phased mass form. If you are in phased mass form, draw 2 cards. So no matter what happens here, for the attack, you're going to find yourself in phased. You're not going to take damage. That's already great. If you already are in phased form, you're going to draw 2 cards. So this is a nice way to reset what form you're in, not take any damage, and after this attack, you will be in solid form. But I think that you will have been able to basically not swinging web kick. You've been able to backflip away, take no damage, or you're going to draw 2 cards, still take no damage, and you're just going to be in solid form. The end result of all of this is that you will be in solid form, but I think that you will benefit from this so much that this is a card that I would also say you want to try to make sure you're playing every time you go through your deck. Make sure this is a card that you're getting full advantage out of. Then we've got 2 copies of Airwalk, a 1-cost event, superpower thwart, hero action, remove 2 threat from a scheme, 4 threat instead if you are in phased mass form. This is just a powerful card. I think that if we weren't talking about the 2 upgrades, this would probably be my favorite card. I think this might be one of the more powerful cards in her kit, just because it does a lot of work. 1 for 2 threat off of a scheme is pretty good. 1 for 4 is fantastic. And once again, the masked form does not care about thwarting. So this does not change that at all. This doesn't force you out of phased form. And yeah, just overall, the only thing that kind of is a setback here is the solid masked form only adds to attack and defense events, so it's not going to be able to pay for this. But either way, I think this is a fantastic card. We're almost there. We've got 2 copies of Phased and Confused, a 3-cost upgrade condition. Hero form only, attached to an enemy, max 1 per enemy. And a forced interrupt of when attached enemy would attack, discard this card instead, then confuse that enemy. So this is nice because it will blank an attack, even against a stalwart enemy. And it will also allow you to blank a future scheming. And that might be back to back. And this really allows Kitty to go down really quickly, go to alter ego form, get that extra draw. That I'm pretty sure she has a 5 hand size. Let me just make sure that, yeah, she's got 5 hand size. I always forget that part of the hero description. Either way, you're going to be able to flip down, get that extra card. You're going to be able to use her alter ego ability to choose which form you're in if you need to. But overall, just that free confusion is really nice. Even the 3 costs is a little much, but at the same time, for what it's doing, I think it's well worth the cost, in my opinion. And last card is Kitty's Bedroom, or Kitty's Room. A 1-cost support, location, alter ego action, exhaust Kitty's Room. If you are in solid mass form, heal 2 damage from Kitty. If you are in phased mass form, draw 1 card. I think this has a lot of use. I think the fact that she has pretty low health and that you're able to supplement and get more than half of your total HP back while you're in alter ego, if you were to recover and do this, is nice. I think the extra card draw is also nice. This has a use, and I would say unlike other alter ego action things that have a purpose but don't always kind of shine, I feel like this can shine. It's not the first card I think about when I think about Kitty. I think about her being in hero form a lot, but still, great card. All right, and I think we are good to move over to the example deck for the episode. All right, and here we are talking about the deck tech, the example deck for today. And I felt a little bad that we ended up in protection. Let's do back-to-back protection decks. With Colossus and Kitty, although I do feel like protection is a good starting place. She came with aggression in the deck. I think that when you're expanding now, you're still working with a small card pool. This is working with a pretty modest card pool. I think that protection is a place that she very quickly goes to. I do think that justice and aggression are both really good places for her. I just think that the card pool may not necessarily be attractive. When you're working with a smaller card pool, I don't know that that's immediately where your mind will go, but I do think that there is a lot of potential there. I did feel bad for a brief second as I looked over this deck, and I was like, oh yeah, I really like what's going on here. But that means that I won't get to highlight the creator that I really admire, the fact that they put out a bunch of stuff that fit into this kind of like 4-deck challenge. Then I read the description and immediately realized that this person was basing it off of what this person did, where they only have the core and the Mutant Genesis box. So yeah, this is a little bit more expanded, still is within the wave. You're still sticking around within the Mutant wave, but you add some Gambit and Rogue cards. And like I said, I think this is a cool twist on that. So let's talk about it real quick. So we've seen Armor before. She's going to be very helpful just in the fact that she is an extra blocker. I don't know that Kitty necessarily needs to worry about blockers too much because she does have her phased form, but if you've got a minion in front of you, you can only blank an attack once. I guess you can do it like every other. So if you've got 2 minions in front of you, you can phase through the villain, take a shot from a minion, phase or not. I suppose you can't because you can't defend. I don't know. Either way, round and round and round in circles logic. But Armor, I think, is a good card to just have to handle that second defense you need to make, or to just be a defender that you need, because she does come down. She's got the toughness, and then she can just make 2 attacks, 2 thwarts, or whatever. But either way, just good card and a staple in protection decks, especially because she requires you to be an X-Men. Then we've got Iceman, a 3-cost protection ally with 2 attack, 1 thwart, and 3 health. And when he enters play Iceman enters play with 3 freeze counters on him, and he has the response of, after a minion enters play, remove 1 freeze counter from Iceman, stun that minion. So he's like a protection version of Hawkeye, who was leadership, I believe, and would basically do the same thing, has counters on him. When minions come into play, I believe he like deals 1 or 2 damage to them. Iceman just helps to kind of soften the blow of attacks that are coming at you. And then Polaris, who I think in this deck is super great because all of your characters are X-Men of some form, so Polaris can come down and just put a tough status counter onto a X-Men character, and that does also help with some of the cards we'll be talking about in a second that I think just benefit from having a tough status counter. So we've got Counter Punch, 2 copies of Counter Punch. It is a 0-cost event. It is a response attack. After a hero defends against an enemy attack, deal damage to that enemy equal to that hero's attack. So the nice thing about this is if you are in phased form, you defend, you don't take any damage. Suddenly you are on solid form, you make an attack, you deal 2 damage, and you flip back over to your phased form. Super cool. You feel like an all-star. You feel like you've pulled off like the perfect combo, and it's just great. Haymaker. This is one of the low-hanging fruit, one of those cards that you'll probably want to take out pretty quickly. It is like the Shadowcat Surprise. It's like the downgraded version of Shadowcat Surprise, but I think when you're talking about a smaller card pool, it's always a good idea to have a couple cards that you will be taking out once you want to level the deck up with more and more packs. I see the purpose of this card. I don't think it's the worst card in the world, just as a basic early card pool card. Mutant Education. I don't know if we've talked about this card in the past, although who knows if anybody's watched multiple of these. So it is a 0-cost event. Play only if your identity has the mutant trait and the alter ego action of choose up to 2 identity-specific cards in your discard pile and shuffle them back into your deck. If X Mansion is in play, draw a card. Even if you're not getting the advantage off of X Mansion, I think just in general, being able to put some of your identity-specific cards back into your deck is going to be helpful. It's going to give you more consistency. It just makes it so that X-Men characters in general have some flavor of recursion. And yes, I mean, Kitty's got cards you want to replay. I think every hero does. But this certainly does a great job of just giving you that extra consistency. Perseverance, a 1-cost tactic event. Hero response: after you change form, which your solid and your phase form count, give your hero a tough status card. So that's great. That means that even in solid form, you don't have to worry about taking damage for a turn. And yeah, just overall card that I definitely see the purpose for. Powerful Punch, 2-cost event. Hero attack defense, hero interrupt attack defense. When an enemy initiates an attack, deal 4 damage to an enemy. Automatically, this is going to allow you to flip your form after whatever instance you're talking about. But the nice thing is it also is a defense. So when they initiate the attack, you automatically get an instance of defense, meaning that if you are in phased form, you're not going to take any damage, and you just also get 2 damage onto an enemy, 4 damage onto an enemy for 2. And in many ways, other than the villain, that's going to take out an awful lot of minions. So that can be super helpful. Then we've got our basic resources. And Moira McTaggart, a 2-cost support. Use only play only if you have the mutant trait. And response: after a mutant alter ego changes into hero form, exhaust Moira McTaggart. That hero's controller draws 1 card. So this is just a great support card. It allows Kitty to just have some extra card draw, which is great. And at 2 cost, this is a pretty great support. X-Jet, just a good staple card, especially for the X-Men. I don't know why you'd put it into other decks that don't have X-Men. If there's a use for this card, and you're like the Avengers play at the table with this in your deck, so that you can help out your X-Men friend. What's happening? What happened here? What kind of team building were you doing? You can exhaust it to generate a wild resource, and you can give that resource to a player who has an X-Men trait on their identity. Yeah, just great. It's a little trait locked, but that's fine because this is a great card. Then we have 3 copies of Indomitable. After your hero defends, discard Indomitable, ready your hero. So this just helps because Kitty does want to make a lot of defending, and not every defense is going to be an event. So sometimes you do need to exhaust to make a defense, and this just allows you to just walk away, hopefully with no damage, but even if it's just minimal damage. Ready to Rumble. After you change form, discard this card. Ready your hero. Once again, just changing any form, whether it be into hero form or whether it be from solid to mass or from solid to phased. It's all good. Really good combo with Kitty in general because she's going to be changing forms a lot, and you can just always be ready. And I think additionally, the fact that this is a card that sits on the table, so you don't have to hold it in your hand. It's going to sit there, and when the time is right, you're going to use it. Unflappable, 1 cost condition, play under any player's control, max 1 per player. Response, after you defend against an attack and take no damage, something that Kitty's going to be able to do pretty easily. Exhaust Unflappable, draw a card. This is just a great support card. I mean, how many copies were there? Was there just 1? Yeah, I would say in multiplayer, you may entertain the idea of 2 of these just because you can pass out the cards. You're already at 42 cards, so you're starting to push it a little bit, but this is a card that's great for Kitty, and I can also see being great in other cases. In multiplayer, there are going to be times when other players are not going to take any damage from an attack, and you can just give them an extra card. That's great. And then X-Gene, which did this too with Colossus. It generates a wild resource for an identity-specific event. Once again, you can give it out to anybody with a mutant trait. You can play only if you have the mutant trait, and max 1 per player. But let me just make sure here. So that does count. That counts. That counts. That counts. That doesn't. So yeah, I would say this has a pretty good home. I'd like to see. It'd be nice if there was 8 things that this could hit, because I do think that one of the downfalls of X-Gene, now with 2 years of it being around and some experiences, this reads really good. And I feel like so often it reads good, but then when you actually put it into practice, you find yourself with a lot of times when this just doesn't do anything. And I think the part of that is it's tied to your identity-specific events. Thematically, it all makes sense, but I think this card reads better than it plays sometimes. And that's just unfortunate because you want to feel powerful. That's part of the power fantasy of Marvel Champions, and this card sometimes is just a dud. That is everything. I think this is a fun deck. I think this is a great iteration, and I think this is a good starting point if you are a new player. But let's go talk about the obligation. All right, and we are back to talk about the obligation. And in this case, we have permanently phased, an obligation that you give to the Kitty Pryde player. Flip your mass form upgrade to phased. You cannot attack, defend, or change mass forms. That can be very brutal. Like I said, you do still have the ability to thwart here. The mass form does not care about that, so you do have that out, but this is something you probably want to deal with pretty quickly. And you're going to do that by using the Ultra Ego action, Exhaust Kitty Pryde, remove permanently phased from the game. So the nice thing is that this is going to trip you up, but you are going to be able to just say no to it pretty much immediately. I would even say that there is a chance that this is given to you as an encounter card, and Kitty is in Ultra Ego form enough that this may just be a exhaust and takes the place of a recovery for a turn. You might not even need to bother changing to Ultra Ego because you might already be in Ultra Ego. It's thematic, and so I do think that this is adequate in terms of an obligation. We move on to a bit of a doozy. We have the White Queen, and I'm even going to just put this into play because so often the side scheme is very important. But the White Queen is a minion with 1 scheme, 1 attack, 5 hit points, and villainous. And the additional, she's elite and psionic, and the additional text of, while White Queen is engaged with you, you are confused.
Tony, what do you think when you hear the word while?
just put a confused status token onto your hero and don't bother taking it off until White Queen is gone, because you basically cannot scheme in this way. What I think is the most brutal, obviously ultimately always being confused is difficult. In fact, if you become permanently phased and the White Queen's out, you're in a bit of a pickle because you can't do anything. You can't do anything for a short period of time. But I think what's really the most brutal about White Queen is that within Kitty's kit, you only have 2 cards, the bigger attack, to just one-shot take out the White Queen. And that costs you 3, so that's going to cost you pretty much your entire hand for the turn. You're still going to be confused. You're still going to need to use up an activation to thwart if you ever want to thwart again. And so she does trip you up very well. I think that makes her a very formidable Nemesis. And additionally, I'm skipped out of this. Additionally, she has the boost ability of You Are Confused. So once you beat her, if she gets put into the deck and she does become a boost card, she's going to confuse you. It never ends. But then let's talk about the side scheme that will come into play off Shadow of the Past as well. That is the Hellfire Club. It is a side scheme with 2 threat per player. It has it has a acceleration icon on it. And when defeated, the player who defeated this scheme searches the encounter deck, discard pile, and set aside area for a copy of the Hellfire Pawn minion and puts it into play engaged with them. This is... Obviously, we'll talk about the pawn in just a moment. This is what I would think. The side scheme is not what I'm the most worried about here. I think White Queen is you need to defeat on sight, and the Hellfire Club is something that you just need to take into consideration, how that affects the math, and also knowing that once you get rid of the Hellfire Club, you're going to have to deal with a Hellfire Pawn minion, which also is something you need to factor in. I think that the Hellfire Club itself as a side scheme, I think the real danger it causes is that it does require you to have a plan. But it's not the card that I'm most worried about. But I do think that it's something you need to consider. Also, 3 boost icons is a lot. But what are the Hellfire Pawns? Well, there's 2 of them. And they are 1 scheme, 2 attack, 3 health with the Hellfire trait. And they have guard, patrol, and surge. So if you're putting them into play from the Hellfire Club side scheme, you don't need to worry about the surge. But other than that, they basically just don't count as a card in the encounter deck for the most part, and they're going to trip you up. Luckily, Kitty is very well prepared to deal with them. Fortunately, her upgrade will not take them out in one shot, but she's ready. And basically, the Hellfire Pawns are just there to make sure that you cannot deal with the schemes at all, cannot deal with the main scheme in any way. I think they're very well designed, but I do think that Kitty, I'm confident, is well equipped to defeat them. And the last card for today is Telepathic Restraint. It is an attachment condition attached to your identity. While Telepathic Restraint is attached to your identity, you are stunned. So it's another form of White Queen. Just put that stun counter on your thing, on your identity, and you will deal with it when you deal with it. And the action of spend Genius Resource, discard this card. This is going to be a tax. I do think that, like White Queen, it is something that you probably want to deal with immediately, because the longer you let it sit, the more the turn that you finally get rid of it is more and more complicated. And yeah, just overall, I think White Queen is the worst card in this entire encounter set. And the other ones are just sort of like additional things to worry about. But that is Shadowcat, a hero that, like I said, I do not feel I am the best with. I think that she is just she's for a player that I think enjoys thinking ahead, that enjoys kind of breaking the rules. My experience with Arkham Horror kind of points to the fact that she feels like a mystic, in the fact that she just sort of ignores part of the game. In the right scenario, she ignores guard, she ignores patrol, she ignores an icon, and that's going to be really powerful. In other parts of the game where these keywords and icons don't come up, she's just kind of a regular hero. And I think there's a lot of power to her, but I just think that overall, she's just not my flavor. And that's fine, because not every hero needs to be for everybody. But I'm not sure if we will immediately hit the Sinister Motives wave. But what I do think is that I am going to break sequence a little bit as I'm moving forward. So next week, or the next installment of this, we'll be talking about either Miles or Gwen. I'm going to be, when I start a wave, I'm going to start with the heroes from the actual campaign expansion box, and then do the rest of the heroes in probably reverse order or whatever. But so next week will either be Miles or Gwen, but I will see you then. Thank you for your time and have a great day.